love to get your take on where is the state of the creative community right now, and is there a potential for us to one of the things that I'm seeing is that it's really hard to find mentorship when everything
Mm,
gets so atomized in the process. If they're firing the leads, how do the juniors know how to grow? And
mm.
so I wonder, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, where is the community, and how can we continue to build a community that can be supportive of each other?
I think that's a really great question. There are many creative communities out there that have there's a sort of, it's not that all the creative communities are disconnected. I think it's just that so many people are feeling like, oh man, I'm completely on my own here. I need to find like-minded creatives.
Mm,
And so they start something, and that grows a little momentum. And there's this little group over here, and then there's this slightly larger group over here, and then there's this tiny group over here. And when you start that, and when you belong to part of that community, you find a place, you like it, you get to know the people. So you tend then not to look for other communities. And I
mm.
think it's really, really important for us as professionals in the creative industries, especially solopreneurs, freelancers, to find those communities and build those connections, if for nothing else, to be able to talk to someone that speaks the same language. You
Right,
know, a lot of people go to those communities for work. That is, of course, one route, but I think it's really, really important to find those kindred spirits, to be able to sit down like you and I have, and talk about story for an hour,
right,
and then go, okay, well, I've got to go and crack on with work now, but this has been creatively fulfilling to
right,
explore what that means. And I think that's really, really important for us,
right.
because I think often we find as creative professionals, and I keep saying creative professionals just to kind of clarify by that, I mean an animator, a brander, a
Completely right.
motion
There's
designer,
a
like
bunch
an
of different
illustrator.
verticals. Right,
Yeah, but also actor, costume designer, lighting
right.
designer, whatever. Um, I think this is true probably of any industry, but at 46, I don't know how many times I've told my friends and family what I do, and they still don't understand, and that's completely okay. And so it's great when you're talking with them, and I've had, as have you, a great career in these huge names, and you say, oh well, I've worked for Disney, or I've worked for Salesforce, or 20th Century Fox, or whatever, and they know that, and they go, oh, that's brilliant. But they don't really understand the magnitude of what that means, of getting that job, of getting that work, of the trust that those huge brands have put in you.
Mhm.
And so when you talk to someone in your industry who understands your day-to-day struggle, they get it straight away.
Right, right. So it's your kin. It's kind of what
Yeah.
we've talked about before, this idea of the kindred quest. That
Mm.
finding those folks out there that are like-minded, that can talk inside baseball with you when you need. I know you're probably not that familiar with baseball, but there you go.
Go
um,
sports.
yeah. So if you could throw down just a couple of communities that you think would be valuable, even especially for our creative listeners that are out there, and then we'll put some more. We'll get some more from you, and we'll put them down here in the show notes. I just point down here like this, like there's going to be something down there. I have
Yeah.
no idea, but
It could
maybe
be
it's over
there. It might
here.
be, yeah.
I mean, wherever we're going to put
Time.
it, we're going to put something. But yeah, so what are some communities that you feel are supportive right now, and that you would nudge folks towards?
I This is not a shameless plug, but I do love the Laetro community. I have
Mm.
find that there is a very supportive um, energy to those Laetro creative members. On the community Slack channel, and there's a really lovely
Litronauts, I think. Sometimes
Laetronauts. There you go.
sometimes we
Yeah.
call them, yeah.
I think there's a really lovely supportive vibe, because everyone that joins Laetro is seasoned, so they get it. They get the
Hmm.
struggle. They get what it took to get to where we are. Um, there's a really lovely guy called Shib Matthew, who set up a freelance community over here in the UK called Juno.
Mm.
They're great as well for a kind of work finding community. But Shib has set up something called Freedom Unscripted, which is on you can find it on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all the other usual kind of places. and he's going around the world interviewing freelancers in the
Mm,
creative industries, and
mm,
they have some amazing stories to tell and some amazing advice, tips. It's all short form, mostly short form video content, but then there are also some kind of longer episodes as well, beautifully shot, um, and and it's in its infancy. So I'm really excited to see
mm,
how that community grows, because I
mm.
think that is very much about finding your kin and hearing from them and sharing experience over and above also getting work or working together or collaborating. It's really just sharing the story, sharing the experience.
Right.
So I'd say that's definitely another place to check out as well.
One of the things that um, one of the things that I really appreciated about Disney was the idea that uh, we were all telling a great big story. And even if you weren't on the same story with somebody else or on the same character, there was this diamonds polishing diamonds
Mm,
availability. You could lean over somebody's cubicle and go, "Hey, what kind of pencil did you use on that?" Or can you show me how to draw a hand? Um, and I think that in a freelance world, the idea of freelance and community are kind of, anathema to each other. They don't really fit. And so that's one of the things that I'm really excited about Laetro, for example, is that we have a freelance community. And my intention is to build it continually with conversations like this, where we're able to support each other in skill building.
mm,
Um, and I know that you have your program for creative leadership.
mm.
Tell me a little bit about that and why you started that.
Yeah, for sure. And I remembered you said about diamonds polishing diamonds. That was one of the very first things you said to me.
Mm,
I'd gone out, I hadn't sketched for years. I'd gone out and I'd done a quick sketch, I think, of Edinburgh Castle here in Scotland. And I'd posted about it, and we talked about it, and you gave me some advice. Like, it was less advice and it was more just like, no, man, go and do it. Like,
yeah,
you've
just
got this. Like,
encouragement.
just
Yeah,
encouragement, and that really, really helped more so than any kind of technical thing. I think it was just about picking the pencil up again, and having you say to me, it's okay, just go and make a happy mistake on the page. And I remember you saying diamonds polish diamonds. Um, so the program, I started it last year. I've been working in the creative industries for 3 decades, and I just finished a really big contract with Fantasy Interactive,
mm,
launching. I was leading sort of 7 or 8 teams at once, launching projects for Ancestry and Dolby and Salesforce and Microsoft,
mm,
and I finished that contract and was talking to my partner, and I said, "Well, what do I do next?" And she said, "Well, you've had all these ideas for courses. Why don't you pick one and just write it? You don't have to do anything with it. Just get it out of your head and see what it looks like."
mm,
And so I did that. We actually worked on it together and we soft launched it last November. It's called Supercharged Creative Leaders. And it is for any professional in the creative industry on any discipline at any level, from about midway up, either client side or agency. And the reason it works for anyone across any discipline is because it's not about honing your craft. It's about elevating you in all the non-practitioner skills that you need to master in order to become a world-class leader.
mm, mm.
So how do you build a team? How do you lead a team effectively? How do you give feedback that lands? How do you stop clients leaving? How do you win new business? How do you understand a budget? All of these things that as creative professionals, we go to design school or art school, or we learn on the job our craft. And then at some point, as we're progressing through the ladder, we get all these duties landed on our plate. And if we haven't had a good mentor as we're working up the ranks, we have no idea how to do this stuff. I
Yeah,
didn't.
when I was at Art Center, at one point, one of the instructors said, "Look around you. In 10 years, only 1 in 10 of you will still be a creative professional." And I thought
Mm,
about that and I was like, "Hey, is that on me or is that on you?"
mm,
As an
mm,
instructor, right? Where do you teach us how to be creative professionals? You teach us how to build those skills, but nobody ever said like, I mean, here's the spreadsheet, or here's how to lead a team, or give positive feedback. I think that the tools that it's sort of like the grad level, creative lessons that we need to learn.
mm. And it's funny. I was chatting with someone this afternoon who I very much hope is gonna sign up and attend the program. And what he was asking was, you have this back. You started you trained and worked in theatre, and then there's the design portion of your career, and now you're doing this. Like, how does that all kind of come together? And what I was saying to him was, well, right at the beginning, it was about story. How do you tell a story as an actor in theatre? How do you elicit that emotional response from the audience? How do you portray what someone is feeling? How do you understand what someone is feeling, what your character is feeling, in order for you to portray it? Then you move into design. It's still storytelling. It's visual storytelling, but it's still storytelling. How do you communicate what you want to communicate with whatever you're creating? And then, as my career sort of happily went from one stage to the next stage, and I started progressing through the ranks, I realized, as a pure creative, I can get to here. And that's completely okay. I say this with
Mm,
no disdain. I say this with no judgment. If you want to have your sleeves rolled up and do the work day to day and create amazing art, amazing design solutions, I am 100% behind you. And you can do that. You can work agency or client side as a creative director, and you produce amazing campaigns or brands or products or whatever it is.
mm,
If you want to progress a little bit higher up that kind of corporate ladder, you need to understand a different language.
mm,
And that's where this idea of my framework of human to human leadership comes into play. That's
interesting.
understanding everyone that's reporting to you is a human. Everyone you're dealing with on your level is a human. Everyone in your leadership, everyone client side, your client's leadership, all human. So, as a human, we all have good and bad days. We all have different levels at which we can work, different capacities in our energy, different ways of approaching, different ways of needing feedback. Some might need it written, some might need it oral, some might need you to draw a sketch. And when you start to understand and plug into a human to human way, especially when you have the language of design and storytelling, and you also have that C-suite language of how a business operates. What
Mm,
what do you what does the business need to achieve in order to grow and be successful?
mm,
When you
mm,
understand those two languages, you can be the connective tissue. And so when your leadership needs to hear something from the ground, you know how to take it, translate it, and impart it, and vice versa. And I
but I
think
think,
that's, oh,
yeah,
sorry, go
sorry.
on.
Oh, yeah, that is one of the challenges for us in the creative field is how do we speak the language of the C-suite or the the sort of more production oriented, or producer oriented side of things. Um, and so that's one of the things that you talk about in your course, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So the course goes through a
And
very structured.
give us a little breakdown. Yeah, like sort of
Yeah.
how do you walk us down the primrose path of that?
Yeah, so the course is 8 hours in total. Typically, if you're working one to one with me, that's 2 hours a week. And then we go through two modules, and then you have a whole week to kind of let that settle.
Mm,
Because overall, I get rid of 130 challenges that you're probably facing either right now or you're soon to face as a someone in a leadership position.
mm.
So it's a lot. It's 30 years of experience in eight
Right,
hours. So
right.
it's a huge amount to take in. Um, and it's very, very structured, purposefully so. The very first thing that you do is I send you a pre session form, and that really gets you to deep think about what are your strengths right now?
Mm,
What are your challenges? What are your self identified areas for development? What are your goals? All of those kind of thinking.
mm,
And then the very first module, we go through that together so that all of that is front of mind for you. And then everything else, the rest of the program, you look through that lens of what you
mm,
want to achieve.
mm,
And what I say to people is, with all of this information coming towards you, imagine I've got a handful of post it notes and I'm going to throw them at the wall. And the ones that stick with you are the ones you need right now.
mm,
But
mm,
you're not going to forget all the others that fall on the floor. They'll still be there for you to pick up when you need them. Um, Once we've gone through who you are and what you're trying to do, the modules are then building a team, which is really partly tactical, as in interview techniques and what you
mm,
look for. How do you
mm,
discern who's a good fit on paper versus who's actually a good fit in real life, and how do you build diversity and inclusivity into your team, and plan that in from the get-go. From there, we move into being an effective leader, which is the biggest topic. It's a huge topic. And that covers, things like giving feedback that lands, but also the human to human framework and understanding how you plan for your team to work at a capacity that allows them to not burn out, but also give you a little bit of buffer. So when you need to
Right,
put your
right,
foot on the pedal, you can go. We move from there into slashing client churn. Often, small businesses and solopreneurs and freelancers, they'll have a client that they'll do one or two pieces of work, and then that client will go elsewhere. So, how do you figure out why that's happening and stop it?
mm, mm,
Maximizing your margin. How do you project by project just grow that margin a little bit more and more and more? Landing the world class brands. This
mm,
is the one that is really enticing for everybody. When I set up my first company, I was working in my spare bedroom until 2 in the morning, making banner adverts for toothpaste that would only ever be seen by people living in Maine. And from that, I knocked on the door of clients like 20th Century Fox and Paramount Pictures and Microsoft and got them as clients. I figured out how to do that. So I
right,
take attendees through that as well. And then the last two modules are once you've landed those big accounts, how do you grow them? How do you work with Epic client management to build long lasting relationships with those clients? And then the very last module is all about forward planning. It's putting it all into practice. So
mm, mm,
there are lots of places that come up with a 90-day plan. I think that's too long. So I will create a 30-day plan with you because that's long enough to hold the vision, but it's also short enough to be granular. What are
right,
you going to do in the next 30 days?
right, right,
And then once you've attended it, it's not just that's it, you're off, I'm there, you can come back, we can have ad hoc sessions, we can have ongoing
right, right.
sessions.
You can do the next 30 days and the next 30 days. You get
Exactly.
practices.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the interesting sort of revelation for a lot of creatives is that you build creative skills, uh, but you also have to build business acumen.
Mm.
Entrepreneurial skills are also part of it. And, if your skill and ability is turning a thought into a thing, then one of the thoughts that you want to turn into a thing is a good, solid business.
Mm. Absolutely. And there's so much that for I think probably almost every creative at some point has imposter syndrome. I'd still do 3 decades
Yeah.
in, still have that kind of rear its head. And I think
Right.
part of that strive to understand how a business works, how do you grow a business, that seems at times so disconnected from a creative approach to
Mm,
producing
mm.
something and having that blossom. It feels like, well, I can do this, but I can't do that. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to learn that.
Uh,
And it's like anything, practice, practice,
Yeah, it's
practice,
just
practice.
it's just practices. It's best practices also, which is the thing that I think you're offering. The I've always had this like there's some it's still a little slippery for me, but there is some paradox with the imposter syndrome in my experience of people who experience it. Is that most of the people that I know who experience imposter syndrome have no right experiencing imposter syndrome. The very fact that they recognize an imposter syndrome means that they're not qualified for it because they're really freaking good at what they do. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like it's sort of this slippery thought that you're experiencing imposter syndrome means that you're not qualified for imposter syndrome. You're not an
Yeah.
imposter. You know, we as creatives in the martial arts, there's this phrase, there's always a higher mountain. And
Right.
uh, I think that you look at artists out there and there's this like, oh, I wish I could create like them. We don't have any idea what's going on with that artist or creative. Um, the at, at Disney, one of my mentors said, um, he said to me, "Hey, when I was complaining about the 26th pass I'd done on a particular scene, and I was like, come on, man, can I be done with this?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, you can be done with it." But just imagine your drawings blown up 100 times their original size, shown in front of millions of people all over the world forever. And I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm gonna take another pass on this, right? And then before I kind of slithered under his door, he said, "Hey, listen, did you do the best you can do today? And are you promising that you can do the best that you can do tomorrow?" Nobody can ever take 3 steps past their growth edge. You can only just push up against your growth edge. So as long as you're pushing up against your growth edge,
Mm.
there's no such thing as imposter. You're pushing up against your growth edge. That's where you are. And
Mm.
so I think that that's just my sort of thought on that. Um,
I love that. I love that approach because there's a kindness in that. there's a supportiveness in that. There's a recognition. It's the human to human thing. You know, everyone's
Exactly.
different. Everyone has their own capacity. Funnily enough, and I didn't think this would come up today, but Arnold Schwarzenegger has a similar, love him or hate him, has a similar kind of thing where he talks about reps. Doesn't matter what you want to achieve, you just put the reps in,
Yeah.
and you, as many as you can do that day. You know,
Right.
push yourself a little bit, but don't overdo it, and then come back again the next day. And it sort of resonates with me, that approach of feeling your limit, knowing you can go a little bit above that, and that's okay, but don't overdo it. You know.
I think that that's where good leadership comes in, is the ability to understand the growth edge of the people that you're working with and how they're doing on it, right? And, can you, like, if somebody says, I'm pretty sure I think I can do 20 of these things, right? A good leader doesn't come in and say, hey, let's do 40. A good
Mm,
leader is like, all right, you think you can do 20. What about 25?
mm,
What about 27? Can you do 27? Right?
mm,
Where do you think your growth edge is, and where can we push up against that growth edge? But if you ask them to do 40, tomorrow they're going to do 4,
mm,
right? And so I think that that's one of the things that I do see often in the industry with OKRs and
mm,
the desire to ramp up maximum productivity. That eventually does lead to burnout. You take a 2-week vacation and it's just not enough. And
mm.
so I think that understanding your own growth edge, and as a leader, understanding how other people are leaning against theirs, is also really important. I want to ask you, what do you think your greatest strength is?
If you'd have asked me that 8 years ago, my answer would have been very, very different to now. I think, and this applies to being a creative, but also just life in general. I have a desire to do things better. Uh, and that comes from knowing that I've done things in the past that I could have done better.
Mm, mm,
It comes from knowing you can always learn. You know, there's always things that you can learn, and I'm open to that. I want to learn new things and I want to grow and develop. And it comes from understanding, and I'm still working with this, but it comes from understanding that you need to acknowledge all the parts of yourself and embrace them all, the good and the bad, the messed up and the wonderful, in order to find some sense of balance and peace.
mm,
And I think understanding that, I'm still on that path, I'm still on that journey, but I think understanding that feels to me a crucial thing for me to get right. And I would say that, and I can eat a hell of a lot of cookies.
oh yeah, well, that is a solid thing. You know what they say about cookies and milk? They say that if you have cookies and milk every single day, you will outlive everybody you know. And if you don't outlive them, at least you had cookies and milk every day. That to me is the most unassailable logic that I have ever heard.
Yeah, yeah, I
Um,
can't argue with
so,
that.
so I think what you're talking about is a really old principle called nothi seuton, know thyself, right?
Mm.
The idea that your story 8 years ago is different than your story today. We are constantly evolving our own stories. Do you have practices for sort of identifying those current strengths and things like that? Do you run yourself through some of the things that you run some of us through?
Yes, I mean the whole of Supercharged is based on things that I've either discovered myself, or things that people far more experienced and connected have told me. I think the biggest learnings that I've had over the last 8 years have been courtesy of my partner.
Mm,
She's an incredible dot connector. She's an incredible seer of people, and takes no BS.
mhm,
And I think she's helped me strip that away so much in all sorts of ways. For example, when I first met her, I hadn't flown for, I don't know, 15, 16 years because I was incredibly claustrophobic, but
mm,
also that idea, like if you're on a train and you have a panic attack, you can get off at the next stop. A
Hmm.
little more tricky to do that on a plane, right? You
Right.
don't just go and step outside for a bit. And she helped me work through that. And subsequently, I've done hundreds of flights. I've flown all over the place on my own with her. I've flown transatlantic, all sorts of things, you know. So I think it's really important as part of that journey to know yourself, to know those around you and
Mm.
make sure those around you are, like, we come back to the community again, they are your kin, you know, and they can see you and they can hold you accountable and they can also hold you up. Not that you should zap them of their energy and rely on them as a crux, but that they can help you when you need support. They can suggest things, they can point things out to you, you know. And if you have someone in your field, in your camp, who is like that, it's an amazing thing.
I mean, it's one of the things that we say at Laetro, that we rise together. I think that we
Mm,
recognize that any big idea you have, you can't do by yourself, and that building a team that sees the highest in you, that trusts you, that holds you, to that growth edge, but is there to support you when you're weary. Like those things where you can trust your cohort, I think is so important. It
mm,
makes all the difference. In fact, I was thinking about this earlier in our conversation. A couple of one of our cohort at Laetro is Rocco Bellic, and I would highly recommend. He did a documentary with his brother Adrian, um, uh, Belic. So Rocco Bellic and Adrian Bellic. They did a documentary called Happy, and it was an accumulation of the last 75 years of studies of what makes people happy. And it's pretty neat. The sort of breakdown. You should watch it because it's fantastic. We'll put that in the show notes right over here. Um, uh, there's about 25%. There's a certain percentage of your happiness that there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. It's your physicality, your health, your station, your economics, whatever. But there's an over 50%, a very large percentage of your happiness that you can do something about, that you
mm,
can adjust, right? And so one of the keys to people being happy is having a small group of enthusiastic friends that support what you're up to. You don't need 10,000 followers to be happy. It's this small group that believes in you. And so
mm,
for me, I think that was a really exciting sort of revelation. Um, and I think that that's what you're talking about, building these small cohorts.
mm. I saw something on Netflix recently that was about happiness, and you know, the filmmaker had gone around the world to different communities, and there was something that particularly resonated with me with Japanese communities. I may get this wrong, but I think it's Ikagi. Um, now I'm
Yeah,
thinking
Ikigai. Yeah,
Ikigai. There you go.
yeah,
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 it was. I got confused with unagi,
yeah.
Ross and
Which is
Friends, which is
yeah,
actually eel.
yeah, which is
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
um,
Not
but
my favorite.
the Ikigai, that idea of a sort of combination of things. You know, it was good food and like certain types of food, exercise, a purpose, and a community, a small community that
Hmm.
is supportive. And
Hmm.
that really resonated with me. You know, the uh, I already eat, you know, relatively healthy. I'm vegan, and I don't think you can get an awful lot healthier than that. Um, uh, I feel like I'm on the right path with my purpose as it is now. I'm sure it may change. I have an amazing partner, you know, that is that good sort of connection, and I'm doing exercise, and it feels like such little steps to take, but actually it has a huge impact on life. And I think, you know, especially where if we're talking about freelance creatives sat in a room at a desk on our
Hmm.
own, talking to people on Zoom, to just get up and get some fresh air and walk around and have that breeze on your face, or rain even on your face,
Hmm.
whatever it may be, and connect with really, really special, important people,
Right.
and to treat our bodies right with exercise and good food. Like, it seems so simple, and yet we seem so disconnected from those really simple things.
Right. You're talking about just finding a balance in the world of
Mm,
demanding productivity. And I think that that's really why we became creatives in the first place, is to uh, recognize and express the beauty of the world.
Mm,
Nice. So,
absolutely.
Adam, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and contact you?
The easiest place to find me is adamjennings.com. From there, you can get in touch with me directly. You can hop from there over to LinkedIn and Instagram. You can also find out details at the top of that over on the right hand side. Yeah, over the right hand side
Right.
is a link in the navigation called Grow with Adam, and that would take you through to the Supercharged Creative Leaders page and explains all about the course there. But adamjennings.com is the easiest place to find me.
Great. And I love that. Grow with Adam. That's excellent. Nice. Hey, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you spending some time with us, and yeah, it's really always a delight when we get a chance to chat with each other. So, Adam,
100%.
thank you for being here, and yeah, stay tuned for more conversations like this.